Hoffaday. I'm back. We are back from recess. It is 3 after 2 right now, and we don't have enough for quorum. So at this time, we're going to take a short recess. Hopefully, it's going to be a very short recess so that my other colleagues can come in here and thank Senator Kanata and Senator Barnett for being here on time. So again, we're going to take a short recess and apologize for the delay. Good afternoon, colleagues. The Committee on Committee on the Whole is back in session. I'll leave the Committee on Rules to Senator Barnett, but we're back from short recess for lunch, and we had left off with Speaker Chalahi, continuing her line of questioning. Speaker Chalahi, you are recognized.
Zuzos Masi, Madam Chair, and to the panel, BBMR and DOA. So thank you for, the spreadsheets that show, and you show us about that you concur that we should fund GMH. If I just want to talk about GMH. So do you believe that the 20 million is enough?
For right now, yes. We more than likely will have to revisit that in the coming months, but for right now, and with the other areas that are contained in Bill 355, because this would be in addition to what's contained in Bill 355. So, yes, the 20 million, yes.
Why is there anything else in 355 going to GMH? Or what do you mean by that?
GMH is not contemplated in 355.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, so in order to give GMH 20 million, there's really, we cannot fund everything in Bill 355. Is that correct?
That is absolutely correct, especially after the amendment was passed for the Mayor's Council today.
All right, and you said earlier, and I guess I just want to get some confirmation that you and DOA would take care of the $750,000 for DISIT. You have that that they're taken care of without an amendment and without an appropriation through 355.
That is correct, ma'am. The amount listed for DISIT, we will take care of their operational requirements.
All right. And you mentioned about the Judicial Building Fund for the HVAC and the, I thought that for JBWIC, Guam Behavioral Health, that we had, the budget had shorted them, but we had, by defunding some other agencies, been able to give back some money for Guam Behavioral Health, and particularly for the detox programs. And so when I look back at the letter they sent us during the budget, it seems to me we've addressed all their concerns except for some opioid, I can't remember the term, but what? Antagonists, yes. But my understanding is that, and the reason I didn't pursue that is because of the opioid recovery fund, the one that the AG is managing, that they're able to give Guam Behavioral Health some money from there for the opioid antagonists, and we're supposed to be providing that throughout the government for free through that fund. And so if that's taken care of, do you agree that the detox that Guam Behavioral Health had requested was taken care of in that last budget through some of the moving around of appropriations?
What I'm working on right now is funding a couple contracts, specifically an extension for Gumamami. So that's another work in progress. So to answer your question, the alcohol and detox programs aren't necessarily, what my main priority is, but there is some funding that we're looking to try to make available to behavioral health. And it's contract specific for some of the essential services that they have.
All right, and then you had mentioned the UOG capital projects. Could you just reiterate or give you more detail on that?
Sure. There's, I think, 3, maybe 4 buildings going up right now at the university. And there's a Treasury Capital Projects Fund that we were awarded, $14.2 million. 7.1 million we were able to provide to UOG specifically for the Student Success Center construction shortfall. As you might recall, they were working off of dated pricing for construction. So we helped bridge the gap with the best kind of money, free money. And then we recently provided the the Student Success Center with $900,000 to be able to meet their FF&E requirements for that building. So we've given them in total $8 million for the Student Success Center.
And how does that relate to this appropriation that's proffered in Bill 355, $4 million?
I'm not sure whether or not the outfitting of the rest of the buildings, the Weary building, and there's one more building, I can't remember what it is off the top of my head, but I think they're side by side at Dean Circle. Maybe, again, they need assistance with FF&E because they should not have broken ground unless they had all the funding for the construction in hand. So I'm imagining it's FF&E related.
All right. Was this part of the list that you gave us on that first day of the budget session? No?
No, ma'am. It was not on my radar.
All right. All right. Are you familiar with the GDOE needs? Because one of the proposals I see in front of us, maybe yours, is that DOE, we don't fund DOE needs in 355, and that would give us enough money to fund GMH. And this is a strange predicament because GDOE and GMH were really the 2 of 3 agencies or entities that came down to testify on Bill 355. So GDOE reiterated their need. Do you have any evidence that they don't have this need?
I believe that they have an ongoing need after the tremendous amount of work that was put into opening the schools. The momentum, the upkeep, the maintenance certainly has to be addressed. And I don't disagree with the need to fund that, but I would make one statement that anything that you give to DOE should be for DOE-owned schools, nothing for JFK, we're leasing it, nothing for Teason, we're leasing it, and not a dime for Okadu, Astumbo Middle, Atacao Elementary, and Liguan Elementary. We spent a lot of time getting Okadu open under a lease, and we're going to actually, in 2 years, we'll take ownership of those 4 schools. So it's really incumbent upon the lessor to keep the school open, and we provided a lot of assistance at Okadu.
All right, and in the regular budget session, we also funded the maintenance that was required for some of these leased schools because there were payments for bond covenants, of course, and then lease payments, and then maintenance payments, right?
Yes, ma'am.
All right, okay. I see my time's over.
Madam
Chair, Jesus Masi.
I'd like to yield my time to Speaker Terlai. So,
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Senator Barnett, you are recognized.
so just Masi, well, Speaker kind of started on the line of questioning that I had, which was, and I know this is, what would you call this, Mr. Carlson, a suggestion?
It's my working notes in preparation for the bill, just my notes.
Yeah, and I noticed you left out the $10 million for Guam Department of Education maintenance, and you kind of explained. And you know, I tend to agree with a lot of the lease schools because we did have to pay, I think, $5 some million for work at those lease schools. And the superintendent in here had said basically it's because the contracts didn't include a lot of the unforeseen maintenance that came as a part of the repairs from the typhoon, and then again to come into the public health compliance. But I'm sure you're aware as well the Guam Department of Education has implemented cost-cutting measures. They've also had the board implemented a hiring freeze restricted to essential personnel, and they continue to say that $10 million, frankly, won't be enough. So we're getting this $10 million for our schools into this budget bill one way or another. And the superintendent is now asking for flexibility with the use of the money as it is in the bill and it was attempted in the budget process. And I do want to speak on that a little bit because it had been said here on the floor that we had $27 million on the table and about $100 million worth of items that, in the miscellaneous provisions. But I just want to remind the viewing public and the people of Guam that there was a process that the Appropriations Chair had laid out relative to amendments with appropriations, and that process was first come, first serve. And for those of my colleagues who adhered to that and did the hard work to get the amendments in first, like myself, so I had these amendments for GDOE were the first in line, and so as I said this morning, you know, going through this supplemental budget bill, you know, I mean, well, like a little more than a month after we just passed the regular budget bill it's not a good look when we have the mayors and their staff coming down here, you know, having to kiss the senators' rings just to keep these community maintenance workers on the job. It's unfortunate that you know, we're here to make tough decisions, and we should have made, you know, $27 million worth of tough decisions in the budget process, and we wouldn't be here. GDOE would be in a little bit of a better situation. So really not much else. I did, though, want to ask, you had said something on the record about the Guam Police Department, the HVAC system. I know this is something critical, but you had said that you'd be willing to nudge the judiciary. And I don't know if you know the balance, but I had checked the balance in the judicial building fund as of June 30th was about $2.1 million. And so, go ahead.
Actually, Senator, it was the speaker who came up to me and Mr. Byrne, and she said that that should have been handled by the Judicial Building Fund. And Mr. Byrne's response to the speaker was, "I think you're right." He subsequently went back to his office at lunchtime and affirmed that that should be something that the Judicial Building Fund shoulders. But he did say that the fund currently is a little short. Something about fines that contribute to that fund kind of not, it's lagging, but the premise that it should come from that fund source was suggested by the speaker and affirmed by Mr. Byrne.
So what are you tracking with the shortage? Because when you checked as of June 30th, it was over $2 million. Do you have any balance?
I believe that his comment to me over the phone was currently the fund is insufficient for the $2 million, but that doesn't mean that in the coming months the balance should be able to materialize.
Well, maybe they can arrange a fundraiser on the side with the radar. And then the other question I had was relative to Section 1G, which is $361,770 to fund police officer trainees. But I know the administration had announced, I think just a couple weeks ago, that the Guam Police Department was able to avail of a grant in the total of $3.5 million to fund the hiring of 30 police officer trainees and recruits for, that kind of sounds like either one big cycle or two medium ones. Can you confirm that?
If you're referring to the COPS grant that was recently received, there's a matching portion that we have to provide. So we're working with Chief Ignacio to identify the match for the COPS grant.
But that grant is for the hiring of police recruits and police officer trainees?
I believe in general, it's not a focus only this. I think it has some versatility attached to it.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Mr. Carlson.
Okay, you're very welcome, Senator Barnett. Senator Parkinson, you are recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I want to rise to address an important matter regarding the extension of the power credits that we've all been working on, and the one that Speaker Terlai and I have both introduced amendments for. This is an issue that affects every single household on our island, and we need to ensure we get it right. Now, during my discussions and meetings with GPA, my office has been informed there's been an increase in the number of customers since the power credit was initially implemented. Due to this increase, GPA now needs $5.4 million per month to sustain this credit. That means that for a 3-month extension, we're looking at a total of $16.2 million and not the $15.8 million currently proposed by the Speaker's amendment. I fully understand that this is a small difference, but we've been talking about the continuity and sufficiency of this program for our people. And so I would respectfully suggest that if the body feels it necessary, we invite GPA to join us in the Committee of the Whole to answer any questions you may have about these figures. We want transparency, and we want to make sure that this program is funded appropriately so that our people don't see any disruptions in their power credits. So at this time, I'd like, notwithstanding the rules, at some point to invite GPA into a Committee of the Whole.
Point of order.
Okay. State your point of order, Minority Leader, Senator Blas.
Thank you, and in all due respect with the what the senator is trying to do here. Madam Chair, we were called into session, emergency session, for the purpose, two basic purposes. Basically, one was to address the needs of the Guam Memorial Hospital and Guam Department of Education, and the second one was to address the ambulance crisis with the Guam Fire Department. I think, ma'am, that it's prudent for us to be able to deal with those emergent situations. All due respect, and I recognize and I understand what he, what the good senator wants to do. However, I rise to the point of order in that, based on the emergency condition that exists and based on why we came into session, that be disposed of first before we deal with with other matters that can be fit into this if we do it right. So I just rise to that point of order. We have to bring it back in order. Thank you.
Thank you, Minority Leader Senator Blas. So that being said, I think we're going to move forward, allow you to continue. You still have 3 minutes and 23 seconds to speak on this, and then Right now, it's not in Bill 355, but maybe we can address it later on after we've gone through the other things that are on this legislation. So,
Yes, I understand, like, my timing of it is a little bit weird, but the way I understand these committee of the whole meetings, by the time we get to the amendments, there's no panel to speak anymore, so that's why I'm doing it now. So we have an opportunity to hear from GPA if that's what the body needs, without having to spring it on everybody during amendments. You know, we have ample time to still address it while we're still in these rounds.
okay, thank you. I've heard your concerns. You may continue if you'd like, or if you yield your time, we'll move forward.
Yes, ma'am. Notwithstanding the House rules, I'm making a motion to call in GPA so that we can get clarity, so that when we do these power credits, we do them right.
You know, based on the comments made by our minority leader and considering that, you know, we're still in crunch time, we do have a state funeral that we need to address coming up this week, and for the sake of time. So I'm going to rule that out of order at this time. At this time, Senator Parkinson, I'm not saying I'm completely not going to bring it back, but I'm going to rule it out of order.
Well, ma'am, I'm going to have to...
And you can challenge
Well,
me if
ma'am,
you'd
I'm
like.
going to have to go on the record and fight for this power credit, so
Okay.
I'm going to call to try and overrule the ruling of the chair.
Okay, you have every right to do so, every right. Okay, I'm ruling this out of order. If there's anyone else, Senator Fisher, you are recognized.
Thank you very much, ma'am. I'm just rising for a point of information. If the body would look at the rule for convening sessions at B1.
I'm sorry, Senator Fisher, I couldn't hear you. If you can speak into the mic. You said
I'm
something
sorry,
convening
yes.
session, or was it, we're in emergency
Yeah,
session right now, so
yes,
you are
ma'am.
reading on the fact of an emergency session, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Please continue.
So what I'm speaking to is the call for emergency session may not limit the discussion before the legislature. I'm looking at, this would be section 1.02 of our standing rules.
I believe, Senator Fisher, it does limit when there's a call for an emergency session and what is ever on the agenda is to be discussed based on an emergency. The power credits at this point is not considered an emergency, such as Guam Memorial Hospital, and as well as Department of DOE, as well as the ambulances. And this is the discussion. We are speaking on Bill 355.
Yes, ma'am.
And Bill 355 does not indicate power credits on that. So we are staying within the agenda. However,
yes.
there has been a motion to overrule the chair.
Well, yes, ma'am. Thank you.
So that's what we have a motion on the floor right now. So if you want to overrule the chair, you can so do it.
Just so the body, when they make the determination on whether or not to overrule the chair,
Sure.
if
Continue,
they would,
please.
If they could just look at Standing Rule Section 1.02B sub 4. It's very short. It says a call to order may not limit the body. Such calls to session of I Liheslaturan Guåhan by the Speaker or by the Committee on Rules may not limit, nor restrict, nor dictate the session agenda. You will find that on page 6 of the Standing Rules. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Fisher. Again, there's been a motion to overrule the officer presiding chairperson. So all those in favor of bringing in GPA, or is there, there's been you wanted to do that, okay. So all those in favor in bringing GPA, please raise up your hand. Motion fails. Senator Parkinson, you still have some more time. Would you like to speak, or would you like to yield your time? This is the first round.
Thank you, ma'am. I understand that. I think I'm good. I would like to yield my time for the rest of this round. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Parkinson. Senator Christopher DeReynolds, you are recognized, sir.
Citos Masi, Madam Chair, and just wanted to make a quick notation with our colleague previous. I think if we, in the event that we do entertain the power credits, we can get to GPA and ask them for the calculation. That's what they've been doing over time whenever we do it. So I just offered that as an opportunity when we get to if we get to that location. Lester, thank you for being here. I really don't have a bunch of questions. I mean, I think you've enumerated very well that we have our list. You've given us the number that the administration feels comfortable with. I just want to reiterate that once again. The number you mentioned was somewhere around 50.3 million. Can I see if that's correct?
51.
51, okay.
Yeah.
So Lester, my only question then would be, given the fact that these are unaudited revenues, although the tracking has been solid, and you've mentioned that, and I'm sure we're going to hopefully boil this down to the emergencies identified, and that's will be our work, as you mentioned. My concern is that in the event that we adopt revenues, and then there's for some reason audit, which basically redoes 27, the 27 million from fiscal year 24, and then going into 25. I'm going to proffer that we do this as an amendment raising revenues for the 25 fiscal year, so that the appropriation authority will fall into that, and all the calculations therein be enumerated. Are you on board with that?
I prefer to have Mr. Byrne respond to that, sir, only because we're talking about revenues received in fiscal year 24. You have the legislature on several occasions provided continuing appropriation authority to agencies. So basically you're talking about 25 revenue assisting with 24 funding requirements. So off the top of my head, I would think that if you were going to raise FY25 revenues, you would do it under the guise of an amendment to the 25 budget versus how this is proffered, which is taking what we're pretty comfortable with saying is revenue collected from the general fund in FY24. So when he comes here, being the CPA that he is, maybe it's better that he give his opinion, but my opinion is that we keep it separate.
Okay, so having said that, I think this question then will suffice to my concern. Then do you believe if we don't do that and we just use the anticipated excess revenues of 24, do you believe then that that appropriation authority will give you the ability to fund even if there was shortages based on the priority and the governor's transfer authority?
First of all, these aren't anticipated revenues. They're actual revenues received. And if you're talking about the governor's transfer authority, you're talking about 25? Fiscal year 25?
Correct, because if we adopt this and we don't go in and raise revenues for fiscal year 25, and we adopt this as an amendment that identifies additional excess revenue from fiscal year 24, we're giving you the appropriating authority, which is what you're asking for and what we're doing in order to be able to provide the funds. These are critical areas. My concern is that if it's only based on the 24 revenues and there for some reason there's an adjustment with downward, will it affect the priorities that we identify and your ability to fund them?
In 25?
Right.
No.
Okay. That's what I want to put on the record so that the governor's ability to manage cash and deal with the priorities that we have identified, even though we're not going to raise the fiscal year 25 revenues, we're going to identify excess revenues from 24, it's adequate for you to be able to fund those priorities.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So basically, I think, pretty soon, hopefully, we just get to work on the list that you've given us. We've identified and get moving. That's just me. I'm sure my other colleagues have some great questions as well. I just wanted to finish with this. I know we're going to probably continue to volley once in a while, for whatever reason, about this 27 million versus the 120 million identified in miscellaneous appropriations. I just want to remind this body, again, we don't have the public auditor with us today, but he was the one who, a couple years earlier, when we were going over some other fiscal matters, made it very clear to us, and this is something really important to understand when we're doing budgeting and we're dealing with numbers, that even bills and laws passed, even years and years and years ago, that have not been taken off and repealed, are subject to fund availability. So it's very important that this discussion about first in, first out is not necessarily the rule for a budgeting process when you adopt revenues and you adopt a budget. It's basically up to what the executive authority at that time will make a determination on what's necessary. Now, I trust that that would be the best decision possible, but the fact is, what I always wanted to prevent was pitting the two branches of government against each other. Only appropriate those that you know you have the money for. So it still would have been completely inappropriate to think that a first in, first out would have been the priority for appropriations. Appropriate what you believe you have. Do it right. And don't get stuck with what the public auditor had told us earlier. You can go back to an appropriation for GVB in fiscal year 21. And if it was never repealed or pulled off the books, you could fund that program. That's essentially what he said to us. That's dangerous. And as far as I'm concerned, that's not fiscal discipline. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Senator Duenas. Minority Leader, Senator Frank Blas Jr., you're recognized.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. You know, Madam Chair, I'm listening intently to the discussions, and I'm trying to figure out how here in this matter 1 + 1 = 2, because you know, when we look at the reason and for why we were called into emergency session, and we look at the vehicle that was used to be able to discuss the priorities of the emergency session, it's very hard to discern or ascertain how we're going to get from point A to point B. Bill 355 does not recognize the needs of the Guam Memorial Hospital, nor does it completely identify the needs of the Guam Department of Education. And even if we were to add that into 355 as it stands, and recognizing that there is, first off, 355 right now, okay, amounts to $36,721,060. Our anticipated revenues collection is $51,030,296. If you subtract the 36 mil from the 51, that only leaves you with $16,891,060, short of the $20 million, that, at least the $20 million that is needed by the Guam Memorial Hospital. At least the $20 million. Last time I checked, Guam Memorial Hospital was asking for close to $25 to $35 million. How then do we rectify, do we resolve the issue that was why we came into emergency session to begin with? Is 355 going to be used as the vehicle to be able to fund this? And if that be the case, what is going to be defunded or taken out of 355? I think we can't have any more discussions, continued discussions, until we figure out what that is. Because as it stands right now, there's not enough money. And, you know, even with the administration's suggestion, well, let me ask, it's just a point of being clear about this, Mr. Carlson. This note, I assume this came from you, and the ones that are highlighted in yellow are the ones that the administration seeks to fund?
Those are my notes, sir.
Okay.
Yeah, mine, not the administration's notes.
Okay, so this is basically what you suggest on your personal capacity, not so much the not so much what the administration is asking for.
That's correct.
Okay. Okay, and I appreciate it. But even at that, there's room for discussion here as to whether or not it should be funded or not. But it's to my point, Madam Chair, is that before we can figure out how we're going to be able to carve it out, what are we carving out? Okay, and I don't see how I can have any other discussion, any fruitful discussion, you know, with the administration. I thank Mr. Carlson for being here. Even if Mr. Byrne were here, I think the body has to make a determination as to how we're going to fit this in. Are we going to discuss the matter with regard to how much is going to be given to GMH and where, if it is, how are we going to fit this in here? Because in the meantime, you know, we just added this morning, you know, an additional $1 million, and it's not even in consideration to this whole thing. So it throws everything askew. Was it a good program to fund? Sure it was, but it goes back to how then do we address the issue that's before us as to why we came into emergency session. And I'm trying to find it. Okay? Unless, you know, this body is going to take what 355 presents to be the amount, the revenue amount, because even at that, I think before we even move on 355, you got to address Section 1. Are we going to increase the revenue that's reported here in 355 from 36 to $51 million? We haven't even decided that. So before we decide on where we're going, we have to decide what vehicle we're going to use. Then I think this discussion will be a little bit more fruitful. My time is up, Madam Chair. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Senator Blas. Senator Lujan, you're recognized.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, is Mr. Byrne going to be joining us this afternoon?
Yes.
Yes.
Can I ask the chair to come back to me when Mr. Burns comes back? Because my questions are dealing with Mr. Burns.
I tell you what, we're going to take a short recess to find out how far Mr. Burns, Director Burns is coming out.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay. The Committee of the Whole is back, and we left off on Senator Lujan, requested for, waiting for Mr. Burns. He has arrived, so Senator Lujan, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, and good afternoon, gentlemen. You know, thank you very much, Lester, again, for giving us your analysis of the monies that we have now compared to what we had actually prior to the budget session here, and now we have a more accurate view of the amount of monies that we have. But my question is actually to Mr. Burns. Mr. Burns, you know, we have some unsettled business since the 29th Guam Legislature, the COLA Relief Act. And that being said, this legislature, not this past budget cycle, and likewise the public law, I think it's 3742, that memorialized the COLA certificates to be paid with interest. What is that situation? Because that's it's a court order that you got from Judge Marcinus to pay out. What is, I mean, we got a court order. If you won't listen to the legislature, won't listen to the courts, who will you listen to pay this out?
Well, Senator, thank you for the question. It's not a question of listening or not listening. If someone, and we had, I think I gave you this response when we were talking about the budget. If a COLA entitled person comes and produces a certificate, we will pay it. And we have done, I think, but only 2 or 3 during the time that I've been director.
Okay, so are you saying if a COLA recipient or certificate comes to you and presents you with their certificate of claim, will you pay that right off the bat?
If it is an original certificate which has to be surrendered when they request payment, and it hasn't already been surrendered, yes, we will pay it, and we have paid it.
Okay, so you're saying that the COLA certificate will have to be surrendered before the check is
what the law says. Yeah.
If I had a COLA certificate, I wouldn't surrender that to you. I'll make sure that you have your check in hand and my certificate, and we'll switch. Here's my original. Let me have my check.
Yeah,
I would not trust surrendering my original certificate without the original check as well in hand.
Well, you must determine your own level of trust.
No,
and I would have no particular difficulty. I would have no particular difficulty.
Mr. Burns, this law goes back to Public Law 2918.
I would have no difficulty following the process that you suggest.
Okay, so you have no problem. Can I get you again on record to say, if a COLA recipient has a COLA certificate in hand, an original COLA certificate in hand, presents it to you, that you would have a check in hand as well, and as they surrender their original certificate of claim, that you have a check in hand.
That is what we have done.
Okay.
On the I think it's 3 that have made that claim since I've been sitting in that
because
chair.
I've got a court order here. I've got the court order here that says it was issued October 13, 2023. It says, good cause, appearing you have failed to perform your legal ministerial duties by refusing and failing to redeem and pay petitioner the amount due on certificate of claim PB001 with interest, notwithstanding any other provision of law. Therefore, you, your replacement, agents, and all others acting on your behalf are commanded immediately upon receipt of this writ to perform your ministerial duty fully, redeem and pay petitioner certificate of claim PB001, including principal and accrued interest. In addition, you are ordered to compensate petitioner and the COLA class for all damages, interest, and costs incurred as directed above. The court will notice a hearing on the petitioner's attorney's fees for prosecuting this case. My understanding that attorney fees came to about $19.9 thousand, almost $20,000. So you had $20,000 tacked onto that. So again, this afternoon, would you say that if the original COLA certificate is handed to you, that you would have a check in hand, that money is available, correct?
Who is the petitioner,
The
Senator?
petitioner, as you know, is the law firm of Phillips and Berdalio.
Can I refer you, please, to the CRER, where we made provision for the redemption of such certificate in order that that could be paid, because the budget law, I think I mentioned this earlier, the budget law authorized the payment but did not provide the funding for the payment. So that is why it isn't here.
Hold it, wait a minute. Back in the 28th or 29th Guam Legislature, this money was provided. This money was provided. Holistically, the government of Guam went out on a bond to pay the COLA recipients, inclusive of all the COLA recipients. This is a part of that. It is money that is there. It's money that is there. That's why I'm asking at this point, because I'm bringing it up. The reason why I'm bringing it up, because yes, no, it's not included. It hasn't been included in any budget cycle because it's money that was there. It was money that was previously borrowed on the bond market to pay the COLA class off. And that is why, and that's why I'm bringing it up now, because you just finished saying it was not funded.
And that
It was previously funded. You're saying, and as a matter of fact, I got a colleague here right now that could attest to the fact that you said that this money was a debt that the government had.
That is correct. But may I respond?
Sure.
You're absolutely correct. A bond was floated to pay this amount. However, the proceeds of that bond was insufficient to pay all the certificates. And that is one of the reasons why there was an attempt to compromise before I got there, long before I got there, to compromise the payment under PB001.
No, and I understand
Senator
that was
Guåhan, I'm sorry, but you're out of time, so I'll
sorry.
allow Mr. Byrne to, did you finish your answer?
Sorry, not quite.
Okay.
I appreciate the opportunity to finish. So in order that we can comply, which is what we're trying to do, with the authorization that was in the budget bill, I asked Mr. Carlson, when the CRER was drawn up, if we could make sure that we didn't spend this funding in order that in total, there was a provision made that should that certificate be presented, and up to date it hasn't been presented, but should it be presented, there would be not just the authorization, but the appropriation of funding to meet it.
Thank you, Mr. Burns. Thank you, Senator Guåhan. Senator Joanne Brown, you are recognized.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and certainly appreciate the efforts of our representatives from the administration to be with us this afternoon. I do want to get a clear understanding, because for me, you know, the fact that we're here today, as I mentioned earlier, in such a short time, has me wondering how effectively this legislature has addressed the overall budget for this fiscal year. And while we continue to see increased revenues, I think we all appreciate that, but for some reason, in this budget that was passed just a couple of months ago, it appears that the most critical needs of the government, and I think we can all concur, I'm sure the public reminds us, you know, the hospital, the education, and public safety, we all know are the top key priorities that I'm sure most of our people would like to see funded. And yet, in the actual budget, that was not the case. I mean, I hear that we may be able to address funding the shortfall at the hospital. They did relay to us that they have currently, beginning the fiscal year, $15 million of monies that are owed to vendors. And so that's right on top of the list. And that was on top of an additional $20 million that they had requested, so that would add up to $35 million. I wanted to get your feedback because I find it very weird. I mean, we're sitting here, we begin the budget process as we did a few months ago, estimating what we think and forecasting what we think in the crystal ball is going to be our financial estimate on what we believe the budget's going to be. And yet here we are again saying, oh, this is excess revenue. We got, 51 million. Wonderful that it's 51, but I'm a little concerned as well that key needs such as the education department, of course, there's always great need there, but I don't see how this particular legislation before us is even going to address the additional need, or I can't say additional need. I mean, DOE was pretty upfront with what they believe their estimated cost was going to be this year. The figure we've been hearing is about $49 million to be able to finish the fiscal year. And they feel that they're short that amount. So I just wanted to get an idea, because this to me is, it's this twilight zone as far as financing is concerned. And if it was my first round, I'd say, oh, okay. But, it's a little hard for me to do that when I've been through so many budgets, and I've never seen this type of budgeting, shall I say, in a nice way. And I've never been into a supplemental budget within weeks or literally a month of, a month and a half of passing a budget for the fiscal year. This is very odd. So I wanted to get your feedback because I want to make some sense of what doesn't make sense to me. Either one of you, if you can clarify that.
Thank you, Senator. When we discussed the FY25 budget, the governor's request that was submitted in January was roughly $40 million more in 25 than the budget that we had for the previous year. And then when OFB came out with a substitute bill tacking on another $45 million, we took a look at revenue trends and we said, yeah, that's achievable. I mean, we hit $149 million above the general fund adopted revenue levels in FY24. Sunday, it was raining cats and dogs. The parking lot at Don Don Donkey was full. The parking lot, we had to go to Home Depot. It was crowded on an otherwise gloomy, very wet day. The number of, it's my crazy barometer, but of gourmet coffee shops where people standing in line, idling their car at $5 a gallon gas, which this legislature is subsidizing to the tune of about 20 cents a gallon. It all appears that everything that we forecasted continues to occur. The withholding taxes is a great sign that, number one, we have people employed, and number two, the employers are remitting timely the withholding taxes. So, like I said earlier, the numbers that came in and the adoption of a conservative budget it reflects well on the fact that we collected more than anticipated, and the CRER shows how the legislature has gone through and availed of those excess revenues for, the benefit of the people. So we did the FY25 budget. We didn't touch the August surplus 24 revenues at the time. So now you have the culmination of what was 37 million. We had a good September. So now, netting out all the other requests and authorizations that's on page 3, we're at a situation where, we're at $51 million of cash received. So we're here today to look at how to appropriate that cash, because it's not a forecast. It's not budgeting. we have the money in the bank. What are we going to do with it?
Well, in terms of how we proceed, and I want to bring this up, Madam Chair, because again, I mean, if we're going to look at, I'm just saying, you know, if we were to agree to the $35 million for the Guam Memorial Hospital, they're saying they need the $15 million to address already at the beginning of this fiscal year, money that's owed to vendors. Now they're saying they need an additional $20 million, which is what we had the hearing on, to be able to get through this fiscal year. That would take up 35, assuming we cover that. If what Department of Education is bringing to us is $49 million, which would just round that up almost at 50. If we're going to say that we're going to fund the rest of Department of Education for this fiscal year, that would exceed the $51 million. So I'm challenged as well, and I concur with our minority leader, Senator Frank Blas, in bringing up the question. I understand this bill that's been introduced by Senator San Augustine obviously does include other appropriations. Again, you can debate whether you think they're priorities or not. But as we weigh this, I don't know how we're going to proceed. I mean, the speaker was very specific in calling an emergency session for very specific reasons. But this bill, as a mechanism for facilitating that, it has other things here that when I weigh it, while important, I have to say if I have to determine priorities, is not as important. And so I would have reservations proceeding with this bill unless we are going to address those most critical needs. Unless colleagues here choose not to, of course. I mean, ultimately, the votes will determine that. But I really think we need to prioritize. If it's cold, hard cash that we're talking about that's in the bank, has Gov Guam's name on it, then I think we need to figure out how do we facilitate what is critical. Because I don't have a comfort level if we're not going to address the hospital issue. And yes, I understand that's an ongoing challenge, and maybe we need to look at how we operate the hospital differently. But for today, with where we're at and having to address funding for these shortfalls, I would like to see those prioritized. I would also, as the education chair brought up, we've not adequately, there's nothing here that addresses the needs, as Senator Barnett had brought up, does not address the needs of Department of Education. And you know, we all talk about how important our children are, how important their education, more importantly, they are our future. So if we're not addressing that with all this additional money falling from the sky and all this additional revenue, and now we've got all this whole cold, hard cash in hand, if we're not addressing that first and we're leaving that hanging, but we're doing other priorities that other members here, I guess those that sponsored this bill, decided what those priorities are, I don't know how that lines up with the purpose of why the speaker called this emergency session. So I just want to bring that to light because I don't know how we proceed without addressing those critical priorities, including cancer care that the speaker has brought up and in her order to call this emergency session. Thank you for the opportunity to ask questions and comment, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Senator Brown. Is Senator Vice Speaker Munya Barnes? Is she in the? I don't want to miss anyone the opportunity, so I'm just going to take a real quick recess to find out where Senator Vice Speaker Barnes is, and if she has any questions for the panel. Short recess. Committee of the Whole is back in from recess. We took a short break. Senator Barnes never returned, so Senator Amanda Shelton, you are recognized.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I don't really have any questions for the panel at this time. I might as the conversation continues, but I think they've answered most of our questions today to be able to move forward with this supplemental appropriations bill, and I'm glad to see that this worksheet that we have as your notes, Mr. Carlson, still includes what you're working with from the original bill, a supplemental appropriation for the cost of living allowance, the COLA, for our GovGuam retirees through the Department of Administration for an increase of $200. This has been something that we've talked about throughout the term. A bill was introduced by myself and several of our colleagues to increase the COLA this year again by another $200. And so knowing that this bill now includes this supplemental appropriation and is included in this worksheet to know that we are able to fund it, I'm sure will bring a lot of relief to many of our retirees who have been calling and messaging since the COLA came out several days ago, not to include the additional $200, which was not passed in the budget. So I'm sure you've heard it. I'm sure you've received some calls too, Mr. Byrne, you're nodding your head. And the calls keep coming in, so we want to do everything that we can. Someone stopped me the other day walking into Kmart asking if we thought the COLA would get the supplemental appropriation, and I told them to tune into the emergency session. This emergency session was not called specifically for this reason. It was called for other reason. This is still included in the bill, and they were mentioning how it would really help them with the power bill as the power credits have ended, and just help with their paying for gas, so many different things with the cost of living here being really difficult for our seniors who are living on a fixed income. So I look forward to continuing the conversation on the bill and keeping this intact for all of our retirees. Sidus Masi.
Thank you, Senator Amanda Shelton. Senator Sabina Paris, you are recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good afternoon to the panel. So when we last were here discussing the budget, we're, I guess, in the tail end of the insurance, the self-insurance for government of Guam. And so we found out afterwards that there was a huge increase in premiums, especially for, I think, one segment of the insurance, not the HSA, but the other one. And so the government of Guam made the decision to absorb the cost rather than passing it on to the employee, at least a huge part of it. And so I guess this question is for Director Byrne. Have you estimated the impact to the government of Guam? And I know this is a huge issue for our agencies because they weren't anticipating this when the budget came, and now it's here. And so what do you estimate the impact to be?
Thank you, Senator Perez. Two things that I think we need to recognize first, that I think you're addressing the local funds part of this. For anybody paid with federal funds, the federal funding will accommodate any additional premiums that are charged to the government. So that accounts for about a third of the whole payroll is federal payroll. The increase that you're referring to is an increase between the premiums that we were paying in fiscal 24 and fiscal 25. During the course of the negotiations, and I think even as the governor said, we were expecting a 10 to 15% increase in premiums, because that's roughly the increase in medical costs. Medical costs are increasing higher than many other costs. Obviously, we want to afford the best medical care that we can. So the actual cost of the whole policy, and this includes autonomous agencies who are also within the medical plan, the cost went up from about 145 million to 195 million expected cost. If you take out the component units of that 50 million, that accounts, I don't know, these are the back of the envelope calculations, but that would account for just under half of the increase. So that would be probably around about 20 million would be absorbed by the component units. And of the remaining 25, probably one-third is already funded through federal funding. So that's about, so it's about 14 million in total that would be absorbed by the general fund.
And so as we go into the supplemental budget, how is that being handled? Are we just expecting the agencies to take it from the budget that we approved? Or how is that going to work?
Yes, and many of them are able to fund it just simply because they have staffing vacancies. So if there's a staffing vacancy, you've already approved the funding. The difference in the premium can be made up from that. And historically, we've not had a major issue with being able to fund those medical premiums, with the exception of the retirees, where we did have to put a considerable increase in, which was that $8 million, because the claims from retirees were vastly underestimated. So we adjusted that already in the budget.
So is this better than what we expected if we were to go with an insurance provider?
Yes, we think that we saved somewhere between 4 and 14 million for fiscal 24. And yes, we've got to the end of the year, but claims are still coming through, so we can't yet draw a line under it. And we think that the saving for fiscal 25 is similar.
Okay. So in the budget that we passed, there was supposed to be a report that's put out 20 days after the end of the budget cycle or the fiscal year. I haven't seen anything come through to the legislature. Are you aware of this requirement regarding self-insurance?
Yes, you know, we do have a report, but as I explained, it's an insurance account, so we have to let the claims come through. And for instance, claims from the hospital usually take about 45 days to actually be billed. So really, I mean, we can give some numbers, but I don't think it's going to be very accurate because claims for the last 3 months will be understated as providers catch up with the billing.
Okay, so we can expect to see this report coming to the legislature because there's
yes.
several
yes.
recipients
we
of this.
Will. Actually, there is a report that we have for the first 3 quarters, and if it would be helpful to the legislature, we can certainly send that, with the same proviso that there are still claims coming through, especially on the 3rd quarter.
Do you feel the need for additional stop-loss insurance to mitigate any potential catastrophic claims?
Yes, and we have, we're in the process of obtaining stop-loss insurance for claims that exceed $1 million.
And how much is that going to cost? Is that, so that, again, I don't think we budgeted for this.
Yes, we did.
We did, okay.
That was in the overall premium budget, and it's costing about $2.7 million.
Okay. And regarding reserves, do we have reserves?
Well, we will have when we've got through this. Please bear in mind that this is the first year of the fully funded self-insurance. So the aim is not to end up with a whole lot of reserves. The aim is to fund the claims that providers bill and our subscribers incur. It'd be nice, of course, if we end up with some cushion, because like any insurance, results can fluctuate. But I don't anticipate a huge amount of reserves, but I do anticipate that we will be on the right side of the equation.
So I know earlier you testified you would recommend a $10 million cushion. So instead of appropriating all the money now, you proposed $10 million. And how did you come up with that number? If you can reiterate the reason for that.
Yes, it was just 1% of the revenues for the year.
And that's generally it
was 1.05 billion. So.
Okay, and that's best practices. Is this something that's considered best practices, or is it just some number that you thought it was achievable?
Best practice, as I think I've mentioned before, is to have 6 months worth of costs, which for the general fund would be about 450 million, and I think that might be a bit of a reach. So it's just a reasonable cushion that I would recommend. It's not best practice. It's just adequate.
Okay. Yeah, so, we're here in the supplemental budget. The reason I'm asking these questions just to kind of figure out or vet what are potential liabilities that we haven't considered. And so you're telling me that we're pretty good with the self-insurance at this point, that you don't expect to see a need to go and fund, get more money to fund our self-insurance at this point?
Not as I speak.
Considering the premiums are high.
Right. Just from what we know now, yes. I mean, there may be a major claim that has not yet been billed, but I'm not aware of that.
Okay, and then again, I know I asked this question during the budget, but do you foresee any other liabilities coming through, like significant liabilities?
We've tried to take account of any liabilities in this CRAR report. Like anybody in a government, liabilities come along, like that liability I was talking about with the land condemnation case. But I don't know of any liabilities larger than that which we put in.
Okay. So the one thing that was very glaring to me with this budget was there was a huge underfunding of the health agencies, GMH especially. And because I was there in the public hearing where they said they needed 60 to 80 million to maintain status quo services, and the budget only provided for less than 10 million. And so they had three options. Option one was the status quo, which was 60 to 80 million to maintain the status quo services. Option two was 30 million, and they would have to cut services, outpatient services. But they also said that was an opportunity for Department of Public Health to perhaps take up some of those services. And then the option three was to close all of their outpatient services and maintain surgical ward, maternal health, pediatrics, and ER. And so to me, it's very obvious the hospital is the #1 priority for this supplemental budget. And I know 20 million was floated, but again, that doesn't meet, I guess that would bring us up to the 30 million, close to the 30 million for their option 2 level. But it's still underfunding them. So I think that should be the priority for this body. And after that, of course, you have education and safety. Especially because we're seeing the Healthy Future Fund really dip. If you look at the money that we've received, the collections, it's a 30% drop. So in 2023, it was 29 million, or roughly 30 million, and 2024 was down to 20 million. And so a lot of these health agencies are subsidized by the Healthy Future Fund. And so I think that's where I believe the funding for the supplemental budget, we should really focus as a body on that. So that's just something I wanted to mention on the record. And it looks like my time is up, so thank you. Thank you for your responses. Thank you, Madam Chair.
You're very welcome, Senator Perez. Senator Siniclas, you are recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair. At this moment, I'm pretty satisfied with the answers that have been given so far with the panel. Thank you, panel, for being here. I have no questions, Madam. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Siniclas. We're going to take just a real quick recess.
The Committee of the Whole is back from recess. Senator Tydegui, you are recognized.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair, for the opportunity. And again, thank you, Lester and Mr. Burns, for being here this morning and this afternoon to answer some of our questions. I'm not sure if we're going to go to a second round, but I have a funny feeling that a lot of the questions were answered is whether we have the funding or not. And it's clear, we have about $51 million of excess revenue, and it was also mentioned earlier that to be fiscally responsible and conservative, a little conservative, 1% should be left in the account for good measure, not just good measure, but for being responsible. And that's about close to 8 million, if I'm not mistaken. Oh, no, I'm sorry, 10 million, Mr. Burns, that you had mentioned?
Yes. Yes, Senator, that's right.
About $10 million to say. What are we looking at, Mr. Burns, so far if the next CRER report coming out for the month of October? Are we starting to see any increases, or are we seeing any change or increase with regards to monies coming in?
Senators, it's really too early to tell. September is a quarter tax-paying month, so it's not always a good guide. I don't have a handle yet on what October is going to be.
And is October and November considered also a tax month, a good month out of the year, or?
November isn't, because it's a short month. It's, there's a lot of holidays in November. December, although it does have a lot of holidays, tends to have a lot of spending in. So that's usually reasonably high. And January, because there's a residual flow from the spending, is usually pretty good. But November is one where generally, especially in the old days, we held our breath.
You are aware that in the budget bill there are actually, I think, 3 amendments that I can think off the top of my head. One for Chamorro Land Trust, appropriating excess revenue for FY25, which we're already in FY25 right now, for about $9 million. And then we're looking at about $198,000, I believe, going to Guam Behavioral Wellness for the nurses' pay, and 300-something thousand, I think, going to, or maybe I switched that around. DISIT is getting the 190, and 300 plus is going to Guam Behavioral Wellness. So we know that we already have an obligation for any excess revenue coming in FY25. So I can see that leaving some funding, especially hasn't been audited. This excess revenue from FY24 has not been audited at all. So I think being very responsible, Mr. Byrne, and by keeping at least $10 million in there, between 10 or 8, would be very responsible. So I appreciate that comment coming from someone like yourself who's, 1, been in this position for many years, and 2, is a professional accountant at the same time. So I appreciate it. CPA, right? Are you a certified CPA? Okay.
Yes, and a chartered accountant. Yeah.
Now, earlier it was discussed too with regards to some 15 million that GMH was talking about. And this is vendor payables. And I know, Lester, you mentioned that 20 million right now will be fine for now, but they do have a 15 million debt. And when it comes to vendors, we're talking about not being able to supply the hospital with, everything from sponges to instruments, to test strips. And this is very important because now it affects the whole entire hospital. If the 20 million is given to GMH to cover some of the other treatments that they're already claiming they're not going to be able to have anymore, would they make that decision? Do you think by just giving them the 20 million, they're going to decide whether vendor payables are more important than the elected surgical procedures? Do they have that ability to choose? What's more important first? Yeah.
Yeah. The question really is how the bill, or the amendment, I'm trying to find.
Or why don't I just ask you this question? If you were to give them the 20 million, would you give them the caveat to allow them to spend it on either vendor payables or elected procedures at Guam Memorial Hall that they threaten to no longer be able to provide?
I think I would prioritize the payments to the outstanding vendors, so that, as you mentioned, access to medical supplies and equipment is not impaired. Any liens are lifted. We are probably going to be back here again if the situation arises where, on top of the provisions for excess revenue going to a couple different specific health or agencies, we are fortunate enough to be able to exceed revenues again. We'll probably be back here.
Yeah, it sounds like it to me as well. The other question I have is regarding prior obligations. It was earlier talked about funding for the COLA recipients for the certificates that need to be paid. Do you foresee as well any other type of debt that we will be obligated, or a fine, or anything that you are aware of that we could possibly have to fund or pay back to the federal government?
Thank you for that question. We're actually very actively working with FEMA on a corrective action plan. We have a working group that meets at least monthly, but sometimes twice in 1 month, where we're addressing the findings in the audit. And I'm very appreciative of the fact that FEMA already released one grant that was frozen, and we anticipate FEMA will be releasing 2 more previously frozen grants as a sign of goodwill towards the effort to address the shortcomings that were identified in the audit. So the OPA is part of this group. I'm part of this group. Mr. Burns is part of this group. We're trying to come up with a corrective action plan, not just on paper, but in practice, so that the areas in which findings were articulated are not repeated. The one thing that I can share with the body is that there was a finding with regards to travel. Now, for whatever reason, there wasn't any supporting documentation provided by Homeland Security, but since all travel comes through BBMR for line agencies, my staff diligently put together a list, except for 1 fiscal year, which preceded us digitizing our files, and we submitted all that information to FEMA to clear up every single travel-related finding that was contained in the audit. So we do have the documentation. It was just a matter of it not being provided at the time of the audit. So I think they were heartened to know that the documentation that wasn't provided will be forthcoming, but more importantly, the corrective actions are not going, in my opinion, they're not going to result in a huge fine. As a matter of fact, Mr. Byrne and I were recently in San Francisco, and we met with members of Region 9 from FEMA, and we had a very good meeting with a dialogue that was centered around continual assistance to us in light of Hurricane Milton's impending pounding of Florida. So they were in between two hurricanes, but yet the Region 9 director made time to be at this meeting as a show of support for the federal government in all areas of Guam's requirements, especially health. So I don't anticipate that we're going to have any significant liability that arises out of that audit because of the actions that we're taking. So to answer your question, I don't believe that there's any liability that we are aware of today.
Okay, and not just that audit, but one that might be foreseeable. Another one. Okay. That being said, one of the biggest issues I had on the budget bill, of course, was the fact that we underfunded the Cancer Care Foundation, our trust fund, by a significant amount. I mean, prior year we were finally got them at $3 million, which still was lower than what they should be getting. I do understand the Healthy Futures Fund is a contributor to some of the issues that we have, especially, and it was mentioned that throughout the year, the Healthy Futures Fund has been subsidized with general fund money. And now it's up to about $12 million, if I'm not mistaken. Is that correct? I'm sorry, I didn't have the CRER in front of me. I'm just going by memory. It's about 12.
12.2, yes.
12.2. And so you're estimating in September, then the full amount you'll be able to pay this out. You've incorporated it in your assessment here as far as your CR report for September? Because I didn't see anything in here that said, subsidy for a Healthy Futures Fund, or, I'm sorry, I should have had it. Is it in there?
Yes.
You're out of time,
okay.
Senator Tidegui, so we'll allow the panel to answer your question.
Okay, and then I'll be done, yeah.
Throughout the entirety of this fiscal year, we've been providing a running shortfall in the CRER. So the September 30th shortfall is $12,329,171. But we netted that out, so that already is taken into consideration before we arrive at the $51 million amount that we're discussing today.
Thank you very much. That completes the first round of questions in the Committee of the Whole. We will return tomorrow at 10 a.m. We are in recess.